The massive space station called Concordia Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Its lights sparkled like a small city, and ships came and went from its many docking bays. Inside the station's largest meeting room, 12 different alien species sat around a huge circular table. Each one looked very different from the others. The Veltar looked like living crystals that changed colors when they spoke. The Nexari moved as one group, sharing thoughts between their many bodies. The depths needed special tanks of water to breathe, their tentacles waving slowly in the blue liquid. Other species filled the remaining seats, all of them much older and more advanced than the newest members of the Galactic Council. In a smaller section of the room, 3 humans sat quietly and watched the meeting. They were not allowed to speak unless asked. Since humans had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago, most of the alien species still thought of humans as children who knew very little about the universe. Hyun-Ki shifted in his chair for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Something felt wrong, but he could not explain what it was. The feeling had been growing stronger for days, like a cold hand touching the back of his neck. He tried to focus on what the aliens were saying, but the strange feeling would not go away. The mining colony on Kepler 442 stopped sending reports 3 days ago, said the leader of the Veltar, its crystal body flashing red and orange. We sent a ship to check on them. The ship found nothing. No colony, no mines, no people. Just empty space where the planet should be. This is the 15th colony to disappear in 2 months, added one of the Nexari, speaking with the voice of their shared mind. Our long-range sensors show nothing unusual. No explosions, no debris, no signs of attack. The colonies are simply gone. The leader of the depths waved its tentacles in the water tank. Our scientists believe this is caused by natural events. Perhaps supernovas or black holes are destroying these places. Space is dangerous and sometimes bad things happen. Hyun-Ki felt his stomach twist. That was not right. Natural disasters left traces, signs that something had happened. But according to the reports, these places had vanished completely, as if they had never existed at all. What about pirates? Asked a representative from the insect-like thoric species. Maybe someone is attacking these colonies and taking everything. Pirates do not have the technology to make entire planets disappear, replied the Veltar leader. And why would they want mining equipment from such poor colonies? There are much richer targets in the core systems. The debate continued for hours. Each species had their own theory about what was happening. Some thought it was equipment failure, making the colonies seem gone when they were really just having communication problems. Others believed it was a new type of weapon being tested by unknown enemies. A few even suggested that the missing colonies had moved to secret locations for reasons no one understood. But none of these ideas felt right to Hyun-Ki. He had studied the reports carefully, looking at maps and data files late into the night. The pattern of disappearances made no sense. They were not following trade routes or targeting valuable resources. They were not even happening in the same area of space. It was as if something was picking colonies at random, testing them somehow. During a break in the meeting, Ji-won, the human ambassador, walked over to where Hyun-Ki was sitting. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but Hyun-Ki knew she was one of the smartest people he had ever met. You look worried, she said, sitting down next to him. What's bothering you? Hyun-Ki rubbed his forehead. Something feels wrong about all this. I know that sounds stupid, but I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something important. Your feelings are not stupid, Ji-won said quietly. Humans have survived for thousands of years by trusting their instincts. What do your instincts tell you about these disappearances? This isn't pirates or natural disasters, Hyun-Ki said. This is something else. Something that doesn't think like us. The pattern is wrong, Ji-won. It's like something is testing our defenses, seeing how we react when colonies vanish. Ji-won nodded slowly. Have you shared these thoughts with anyone else? Who would listen? The other species think human intuition is just emotional nonsense. They want facts and data, not feelings and hunches. Across the room, Minho was studying data on his portable computer. He was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, and he had been looking at information from the disappeared colonies for weeks. His face was pale and his hands shook slightly as he scrolled through files. Minho, Ji-won called softly. Come join us. Minho looked up, then walked over with his computer. I've been looking at the biological data from the missing colonies, he said. It's very strange. According to the records, these places had perfect ecosystems, no diseases, no problems with food production, no conflicts between different species living there. That sounds like good news, Hyunki said. No, that's what makes it strange, Minho replied. Perfect ecosystems don't exist in nature. There are always problems, always some kind of stress or challenge. But these colonies had none. It's as if something made them perfect right before they disappeared. Hyunki felt that cold feeling on his neck again, stronger this time. What if that's the point? What if something is looking for perfect places and taking them? Taking them where? Jiwon asked. I don't know, Hyunki admitted. But I think we need to warn the other colonies. Tell them to expect something unexpected. Back in the main meeting room, the alien representatives were still arguing about theories and explanations. The Veltar showed mathematical models proving that the disappearances were random events. The Nexari shared data from their collective consciousness, showing no unusual patterns in the quantum fields around the missing colonies. The depths discussed their deep space monitoring systems, which had detected nothing threatening. But Hyunki noticed something the aliens had missed. Every time they talked about the missing colonies, they used past tense, as if these places had been gone for a long time. But some of these colonies had vanished just days ago. Why did it feel like they had been forgotten for years? We should send more ships to investigate, suggested the Thorix representative. We have already sent 12 investigation teams, replied the Veltar leader. They found nothing useful. Empty space and normal radiation levels. Then perhaps we should increase security around the remaining colonies, said one of the depths. Security against what? Asked the Nexari. We do not even know what we are fighting. Hyunki stood up slowly. He was not supposed to speak without permission, but the feeling of wrongness was now so strong he could barely think about anything else. Excuse me, he said. The room became quiet. All eyes turned to look at the young human who had dared to interrupt their important discussion. Yes? Said the Veltar leader, its crystal body flashing with impatient colors. I think we're looking at this problem the wrong way, Hyunki said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. We're trying to find logical explanations for something that might not be logical at all. What if these disappearances are not random? What if something is deliberately testing us? The alien representatives exchanged looks. Some seemed amused, others annoyed. Testing us for what purpose? Asked the Thorix. I don't know, Hyunki admitted. But humans have a saying. When something feels wrong, it usually is wrong. And everything about this situation feels very, very wrong. The Veltar leader's crystal body flashed bright red. Feelings and intuition are not reliable ways to understand the universe. We need facts, data, and logical analysis. Sometimes facts and data can miss important things, Hyunki replied. Sometimes you need to trust your instincts to see what your instruments cannot detect. The room erupted in discussion. Some aliens laughed at the idea of trusting human emotions over advanced technology. Others seemed thoughtful, wondering if there might be truth in what the young human had said. But as they argued, none of them noticed that another colony had just gone silent. And in the darkness between stars, something vast and patient continued its ancient work, moving closer to the heart of the galaxy with each passing day. Hyunki sat down, feeling both embarrassed and relieved that he had spoken. Jiwon patted his shoulder encouragingly, while Minho nodded in agreement. The three humans might not have all the answers, but they knew one thing for certain. Something was terribly wrong, and the galaxy was running out of time to figure out what it was. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency meeting at Concordia Prime, and things had gotten much worse. What started as individual colony disappearances had grown into something that made even the most logical alien minds feel worried. Entire star systems were now showing signs of what the scientists called sterilization. These systems still existed, but they were empty of all life, all artificial signals, and all signs that anyone had ever lived there. Taejun sat in his small office deep inside Concordia Prime, surrounded by screens showing data from across the galaxy. As a data analyst for the Council's Intelligence Division, his job was to find patterns in large amounts of information. But the pattern he was seeing now made his hands shake as he typed. Computer, show me galactic historical records for the past 200,000 years, he said. The main screen lit up with a timeline of galactic history. Taejun had been working on this research for days, comparing the current disappearances with similar events from the past. What he found was terrifying. Every 50,000 years, something like this had happened before. Large numbers of colonies and civilizations would vanish without explanation. Previous galactic historians had blamed these events on natural disasters. They said supernovas or gamma-ray bursts from the galactic center had killed these civilizations. But Taijun was finding evidence that this was not true. He pulled up reports from 50,000 years ago. The Kyrian Empire, which had ruled half the galaxy, had simply vanished over the course of 6 months. Historical records said a massive supernova had destroyed their worlds. But Taijun found star charts showing that no supernova had occurred in that region of space, 100,000 years ago. The same thing had happened to the Zephyrian Federation. 150,000 years ago, it was the First Galactic Republic. Each time, entire civilizations disappeared. And each time, historians found natural explanations that did not match the physical evidence. They're not natural disasters, Taijun whispered to himself. Something has been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Bo Young was leading another search and rescue mission into the affected regions. Her ship, the Dawn's Hope, was one of the fastest vessels in the human fleet, and she had volunteered to investigate areas where other ships feared to go. "Captain, we're approaching the Tau Ceti system," said her navigation officer, a young man named Jun Ho. "This system was reported missing 4 days ago." Bo Young looked at the main screen. Tau Ceti was supposed to have 3 planets with thriving mining colonies. The star itself was still there, burning bright and normal, but the planets were gone. Not destroyed, not broken apart, just gone. Empty space where worlds should be. "Run a full sensor sweep," Bo Young ordered. "Look for anything unusual." "Captain," called Dong Hyun from the engineering station. He was their psychic-sensitive engineer, one of the few humans who had developed mental abilities after exposure to alien technology. "I'm getting something strange." "What kind of strange?" Bo Young asked. Dong Hyun held his head in his hands, his face twisted with concentration and pain. "It's hard to describe. There's something here but not here. Something vast and hungry. It feels like it's watching us." The other crew members looked nervous. They had learned to trust Dong Hyun's abilities, even though most aliens thought human psychic sensitivity was impossible. "Are we in danger?" Bo Young asked. "I don't think so. Not right now. Whatever it is, it's not interested in us. We're too small, too simple. I can't explain it properly." Bo Young made a decision. "Record everything Dong Hyun says and include it in our report. The council might not believe it, but I want it on record." Back on Concordia Prime, Yuna was working late in her physics laboratory. She was studying something called exotic matter, strange particles that barely existed in normal space. Her research had been purely theoretical until the disappearances started. Now she thought her work might provide answers. "Computer, run simulation 847, she said. The laboratory filled with a holographic display of spacetime, showing how matter and energy moved through the universe. Yuna had been trying to understand how entire planets could vanish without leaving traces. What if they're not being destroyed? She said to herself. What if they're being moved somewhere else? She adjusted the simulation to show exotic matter interactions. According to her calculations, beings that existed partially outside normal spacetime could move objects from one reality to another. To sensors in normal space, it would look like these objects had simply stopped existing. That's why we can't detect them. Yuna realized. They're not fully in our dimension. She worked through the night developing equations that showed how such beings might operate. By morning, she had a theory that explained everything. The disappearances, the lack of debris, even why the events happened every 50,000 years. But when she presented her findings to the Council's Science Committee, they politely thanked her and filed her report under requiring further study. The alien scientist could not accept that something existed outside their understanding of physics. As the weeks passed, more reports came in from the Outer Rim territories. Jin Wu, a human colony administrator on the planet New Sol, sent increasingly worried messages to Concordia Prime. The evacuations are not working fast enough, he transmitted. We're getting reports of entire systems going dark with no warning. People are panicking and our ships can't move everyone to safety in time. His final message arrived 3 days later, sent automatically by his colony's emergency systems. This is New Sol Colony. Administrator Jin Wu reporting. We are observing unusual spatial distortions in our star system. The outer planets have... I'm not sure how to describe this. They appear to be fading away. Not exploding, not burning, just becoming less real somehow. I can see them, but our instruments say they're not there. We are beginning evacuation procedures, but I fear we may not have enough time. There are shadows moving between the stars, and space itself feels wrong. If anyone receives this message, warn others this is not a natural phenomenon. Something is deliberately not the message cut off. When rescue ships reached the new Sol system 2 days later, they found empty space where a thriving colony of 50,000 people had been. The star was still there, still burning normally, but everything else was gone. On Concordia Prime, the council chambers buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from all 12 species argued about what to do next. The Veltar insisted on more scientific study. The Nexari wanted to send their collective consciousness to investigate. The depths suggested retreating to the deep ocean worlds where they felt safest. But in the human section, Hyun-Ki, Ji-won, and their colleagues were having a different conversation. "The pattern is becoming clearer," said Min-ho, showing them data on his computer. "Whatever is doing this, it's not random. It's moving in a spiral pattern toward the center of the galaxy." "How long do we have?" Ji-won asked. "At the current rate, it will reach the core systems in about 6 months," Min-ho replied. "Maybe less." Hyun-Ki felt that familiar cold feeling on his neck stronger than ever. "We need to convince the council to take action now." "But they won't listen to human intuition." "Then we need to find proof they can't ignore," Ji-won said. "Something that even their logical minds will have to accept." Unknown to them, that proof was already on its way. Deep in space, an ancient monitoring station was waking up after 50,000 years of silence, built by a civilization that no longer existed. It had been waiting for this moment. When the Devourers returned to claim another harvest from the galaxy, the station began transmitting warnings in languages that had been dead for millennia. Soon those warnings would reach Concordia Prime, and everything the galaxy thought it knew about the universe would change forever. But for now, the humans could only trust their instincts and hope that someone would listen before it was too late. The feeling of wrongness that had started as a whisper in Hyun-Ki's mind was now a scream that echoed through every human heart. Something vast and terrible was coming, and the galaxy was not prepared for what it would bring. In the darkness between stars, ancient entities continued their patient work, moving closer to the heart of civilization with each passing day. They had done this many times before, and they would do it many times again. For them, organic life was nothing more than a temporary infection to be cleansed from the galaxy. But this time, something was different. This time, humans were part of the galactic community, and humans had a gift that no other species possessed: the ability to sense danger that could not be measured or calculated. The question was whether that gift would be enough to save them all. The ancient monitoring station called Eternal Vigil had been floating in the darkness for over 50,000 years. Built by a civilization whose name was lost to time, it looked like a massive crystal tower covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at directly. For millennia, it had been silent and dead, just another piece of space debris that ships avoided out of caution. But now it was waking up, deep inside the station. Systems that ran on technology no current species understood began to activate. Lights flickered on in corridors that had been dark since before the oldest galactic civilization was born. And then suddenly it began to broadcast. The signal reached Concordia Prime 3 days later. Communications Officer Hana was the first to detect it, working the night shift in the station's signal monitoring center. She was used to hearing routine traffic between ships and colonies, but this signal was different. It was powerful, complex, and transmitted on frequencies that should have been impossible to use. "Captain Park, you need to hear this," she called to her supervisor. Captain Park hurried over to Hana's station. "What is it?" "Unknown signal from grid sector 7439. It's broadcasting continuously on multiple frequencies. But Captain, the signal is encoded in dead languages. Languages that haven't been used for thousands of years." Captain Park frowned. "Pirates trying to confuse us?" "No, sir. This is different. The signal is coming from something called Eternal Vigil. According to our databases, that's a monitoring station built by the architects." The mention of the architects made Captain Park go pale. The architects were legendary, a civilization so advanced that other species still found their technology impossible to understand. They had vanished mysteriously about 50,000 years ago. leaving behind only empty cities and strange devices that no one could figure out how to use. "Get me the Council's Xenolinguistics department," Captain Park ordered. "If the architects built something that's suddenly talking, we need to know what it's saying." Dr. Sijin had been studying dead languages for 20 years, but she had never seen anything like the signal from Eternal Vigil. Working alongside Wu Jin, a human expert in comparative mythology, she spent days trying to decode fragments of the ancient message. The languages were incredibly old, from civilizations that had existed long before current galactic records began. But slowly, painfully, Sijin and Wu Jin began to piece together the meaning of the warnings. "Listen to this," Sejin said, her voice shaking as she read from her translation notes. "This fragment seems to say, 'The devourers of light return as they have returned before. They come not with fire or blade, but with the hunger for existence itself.'" Wu Jin leaned over her shoulder, studying the ancient text. "And this part, they do not destroy, they unmake. They do not kill, they cause never to have been. Beware the pattern of consumption, for it follows the spiral path to the heart of all things." Sijin felt cold fingers trace down her spine. "Wu Jin, look at this section. It mentions specific time periods. Every cycle of the Great Wheel, when 50,000 years have passed, they return to harvest what has grown in their absence." The two humans worked through the night, translating more and more of the ancient warning. With each decoded fragment, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. The devourers were not invaders from another galaxy. They were something far worse. Entities that existed partially outside reality itself. Cosmic forces that periodically cleaned out what they saw as excessive growth in the universe. "According to this," Wu Jin said, pointing to a particularly difficult passage, "they don't think of us as alive. To them, we're more like infections. Growths that need to be removed to keep the galaxy healthy." When Sijin and Wu Jin presented their translations to the Council, the reaction was mixed. Some species were fascinated by the historical implications. Others dismissed the warnings as superstition from primitive ancestors. But Chan Ho, a human military strategist, immediately understood what the translations meant for galactic defense. He had been studying the pattern of disappearances for weeks, trying to find some way to predict where the next attacks would occur. The ancient warning mentions a spiral path, he told the Emergency Defense Committee. "I've been mapping the disappearances and they are following a spiral pattern, but not a random spiral. It's systematic, like something is testing our defenses before moving to more important targets." He activated a holographic display of the galaxy, showing red marks where colonies and systems had vanished. The pattern was now unmistakable. A spiral moving slowly inward toward the galactic core, where the most important worlds and highest populations were located. "If this pattern continues," Chan Ho said, "the devourers will reach the core systems in approximately 5 months. That includes Earth, the Veltar homeworld, the Nexari Collective Consciousness Center, and every other major population center in the galaxy." The committee members shifted nervously in their seats. For the first time, the alien representatives were beginning to realize that this threat might be real. Dr. Subin, a human xenopsychologist, had been studying the translated warnings from a different angle. Her specialty was understanding how different species thought and behaved, and she was trying to figure out how the devourers' minds worked. The ancient texts described them as a kind of cosmic immune system, she explained to a gathering of scientists and military officers. They don't see individual people or civilizations. They see the galaxy as a single organism, and they believe they're protecting it from harmful growth. "How do we fight something like that?" asked Commander Ryu, the head of Galactic Defense Forces. "We can't fight them," Subin replied. "At least not in any way we understand fighting. They exist partially outside our reality. Our weapons, our shields, our entire military technology is designed to work against threats that exist in normal space. But these entities can simply step outside our dimension whenever they want." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations, with all their powerful weapons and defensive systems, were helpless against an enemy that could ignore the basic rules of physics. "Then what do we do?" Commander Ryu asked quietly. "We need to think like them," Subin said. "The ancient warnings suggest that they have rules, patterns they follow. They're not completely random. If we can understand their rules, maybe we can find a way to work around them. Back on Concordia Prime, Hyun-Ki was experiencing the worst attack of wrongness he had ever felt. The feeling that had started as a whisper weeks ago was now a constant pressure in his mind, like standing next to a waterfall of pure terror. "It's getting closer," he told Ji-won as they walked through the station's main corridor. "Whatever these devourers are, I can feel them approaching. It's like sensing a thunderstorm coming, but 1,000 times worse." Ji-won nodded grimly. The other human crews are reporting similar feelings. Captain Bo Young says her psychic-sensitive engineer can barely function anymore. The wrongness is so strong that it's making him physically sick. "Have any of the alien species reported similar experiences?" Hyun-Ki asked. "No, their minds work differently than ours. They process threats through logic and analysis. We evolved to sense danger through intuition and pattern recognition. That's why we can feel the devourers coming and they can't." As if summoned by their conversation, Minho appeared around a corner carrying a portable computer and looking exhausted. He had been working with the xenobiology department to analyze samples from the areas where colonies had vanished. "I found something," he said without greeting them. "I've been studying the biological data from the disappeared colonies, and I think I know why the devourers took them." "What did you find?" Ji-won asked. "Every single colony that vanished had achieved what we call biological perfection," Minho explained. "Perfect food production, no diseases, no conflicts between species, optimal population growth. On the surface, these seem like good things. But," Hyun-Ki prompted, "but biological perfection doesn't exist in nature," Minho continued. "Real ecosystems are always messy, always struggling, always adapting to new challenges. These perfect colonies were artificial. They had been optimized." "Optimized by what?" "I think by the devourers themselves," Minho said quietly. "I think they were preparing these colonies, making them ready for harvest. Like a farmer preparing a field before cutting the grain." The three humans stood in the corridor, letting this horrible realization sink in. The devourers had not been randomly attacking colonies. They had been carefully selecting and preparing them, turning them into perfect examples of galactic civilization before erasing them completely. "If that's true," Hyun-Ki said slowly, "then they're not just destroying us. They're studying us, learning how we work, how we think, how we organize ourselves. And once they've learned everything they need to know," Ji-won added, "they'll harvest the entire galaxy." Across the station, emergency alerts began sounding. Another system had gone silent, this one much closer to the galactic core than any previous disappearance. The devourers were accelerating their schedule. In the council chambers, panic was beginning to replace logical debate. Representatives who had spent weeks arguing about theories and explanations now faced the undeniable truth. 5 months. That was all the time the galaxy had left before the devourers reached the core systems. The ancient monitoring station Eternal Vigil continued broadcasting its warnings, and now the xenolinguistics teams had translated enough to understand the full scope of the threat. The devourers had harvested the galaxy 12 times before. Each time they left behind a few scattered survivors to rebuild civilization, like gardeners leaving seeds for the next crop. But this harvest would be different. This time they had learned enough about galactic civilization to ensure complete success. Engineer Jae-min stood in the largest workshop on Concordia Prime, surrounded by pieces of technology that no one fully understood. These were fragments recovered from architect ruins, devices that used the same reality anchor technology as the Eternal Vigil station. For weeks, teams of the galaxy's best scientists had been trying to reverse engineer how they worked. "The basic principle is simple," Jae-min explained to the assembled group of engineers and scientists. "Normal matter exists in what we call baseline reality. But these devices create pockets of reinforced existence, areas where reality is so strong that even the devourers can't unmake it." Dr. Yuna, the physicist who had first theorized about exotic matter interactions, nodded excitedly. "It's like the difference between a pencil sketch and a sculpture. The sketch can be erased easily, but the sculpture is too solid, too real to simply disappear." "But can we build enough of these devices to protect entire star systems?" asked Commander Ryu, the head of Galactic Defense. Jae-min looked uncertain. "The technology is incredibly complex. We're basically trying to rebuild machines designed by beings who understood the universe in ways we can't even imagine, but Maybe, if every species contributes their best engineers, and we work around the clock, we might be able to protect the most important worlds. While the engineers worked on technology, philosopher Hye-rin was working with quantum mechanics expert Kyung-soo on something even more ambitious. If they couldn't hide from the Devourers, maybe they could fool them instead. Think about it this way, Hye-rin explained to the strategy committee. The ancient warnings say the Devourers see the galaxy as a single organism. They're trying to remove what they consider diseased tissue. But what if we could convince them that they've already succeeded? How do we do that? Asked General Park, the human military representative. We create false realities, Kyung-soo said, activating a holographic display. Using the reality anchor technology, we can build decoy civilizations. Fake colonies, artificial worlds, entire star systems that look real to the Devourers but are actually empty. Like a magician's trick, Hye-rin added. We make them look at the fake targets while the real populations hide somewhere else. The plan was incredibly risky and required perfect cooperation between all galactic species. Diplomatic coordinator Gi-tae spent his days moving between different species representatives, trying to overcome thousands of years of mistrust and territorial disputes. The Veltar crystal beings say they need 3 star systems to evacuate their entire population, Gi-tae reported to G1. The Nexari collective consciousness requires special quantum field generators to maintain their group mind during the evacuation. The depths need water worlds, the Thorics need high-gravity planets, and everyone has different atmospheric requirements. What about the humans? Ji-won asked. We're the easy ones, Gi-tae replied with a tired smile. Humans can adapt to almost any environment. We can help coordinate the other species' evacuations while they're arguing about technical details. Systems coordinator. So Young was in charge of the massive undertaking of retrofitting thousands of worlds with reality anchor networks. It was like trying to build a house while the foundation was already on fire. But somehow the galaxy's engineers were making progress. We've completed anchor installations on 847 worlds, she reported during the daily status meeting. Another 2,300 are in progress. But we're running into problems with the outer rim colonies. Many of them don't have the industrial capacity to build the anchor networks themselves. What about mobile anchors? Suggested Captain Bo Young, who had just returned from another reconnaissance mission to the affected regions. Small devices that ships can carry to protect themselves temporarily? We're working on it, So Young replied. But the mobile versions are much weaker. They might protect a single ship for a few hours, but they won't stop the Devourers from finding it eventually. As the weeks passed, Scout pilot Jun Seo brought back increasingly disturbing reports from the outer rim. He was one of the few pilots brave enough to fly close to areas where the Devourers were active. And what he saw there challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about reality. It's not just that the colonies are gone, he explained to the intelligence committee. It's like the universe is forgetting they ever existed. I flew to the Kepler 442 system, where the mining colony disappeared months ago. According to my instruments, there's a star there, but I couldn't see it. My eyes said empty space, but my sensors said there was a normal G-type star with 3 planets. Could it be sensor malfunction? Asked Commander Ryu. No, sir. I tested the same sensors on other systems and they worked perfectly. It's like space itself is confused about what's real and what isn't. Dr. Subin, the xenopsychologist who had been studying the Devourers' behavior patterns, had developed a theory about what Junseo was experiencing. The Devourers don't just erase matter and energy, she explained. They erase the concept of existence itself. When they unmake something, reality has to adjust to fill the gap. That's why the sensors still detect a star where our eyes see empty space. The universe is trying to remember what used to be there. Is that why humans can sense them coming? Asked Hyun-ki, who was still experiencing waves of wrongness that sometimes made him feel physically sick. Exactly. Human pattern recognition evolved to detect threats that didn't follow logical rules. Predators that might attack from unexpected directions, weather patterns that didn't match normal cycles, social situations that felt dangerous even when they looked safe. The Devourers represent the ultimate irrational threat. Back in the engineering workshops, Jae-min and his teams had achieved something remarkable. They had successfully built a small reality anchor network that could protect an area the size of a space station. The test had worked perfectly, creating a bubble of reinforced existence that even their most advanced sensors couldn't penetrate from the outside. The good news is that it works. Jamin reported to the council. The bad news is that each anchor network requires exotic matter that's incredibly difficult to produce. We can protect maybe a dozen worlds with the materials we have available. A dozen worlds out of thousands, said the Veltar representative, its crystal body flashing with despair. How do we choose which civilizations live and which ones die? We don't, said G1 firmly. We save everyone or we save no one. The human ambassador's words sparked a fierce debate in the council chambers. Some species argued for protecting only the most important worlds. Others wanted to abandon the outer colonies and concentrate everyone in the core systems. A few even suggested surrendering some populations to the Devourers in hopes of satisfying their hunger. But the humans refused to accept any plan that involved abandoning parts of galactic civilization. They had seen what happened when people gave up on each other, and they knew that survival required everyone working together. There has to be another way, Hyunki said during one of the heated debates. We're thinking about this like a military problem, but maybe it's not. Maybe we need to think about it like a survival problem. What's the difference? Asked the Thorax representative. In military thinking, you try to defeat your enemy, Hyunki explained. But in survival thinking, you try to outlast the threat. You hide, you adapt, you wait for conditions to change. Subin picked up on his line of thinking. The ancient records say the Devourers have harvested the galaxy 12 times before. But they always leave survivors. Why? Maybe because they need us, said Hyerin slowly. If they're like a cosmic immune system, they need something to fight against. A universe with no life, no growth, no complexity would be perfectly healthy and perfectly dead. So they take most of what exists but leave enough to regrow, Kyung-soo added. Like pruning a tree, cut away most of the branches but leave enough for new growth. Then the question is, said G1, how do we make sure we're part of what gets left behind? As if in response to her question, alarms began sounding throughout Concordia Prime. On the main display screen, a red warning flashed. Multiple core systems going silent. Devourer presence confirmed in inner galactic regions. The harvest had begun ahead of schedule. The Devourers were no longer testing and preparing. They were actively unmaking the heart of galactic civilization, and all the galaxy's preparations might not be enough to stop them. Dongwu, the crisis commander, stood before the main tactical display as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Entire sectors were going dark as the reality anchor networks activated automatically, creating islands of existence in an ocean of nothingness. Status report, he ordered. 17 core systems have activated emergency protocols, reported Communications Officer Lee. The Devourers arrived like a wave of impossible darkness that hurt to look at directly. They were not ships or creatures in any sense that living minds could understand. They were gaps in reality itself, spaces where the universe forgot how to exist. When Jun Seo tried to describe them later, the best he could manage was like looking at the shape of something that had never been born. Command Center Operator Dongwu watched his tactical displays as the outer defensive lines simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. The massive defense platforms that had taken decades to build vanished from sensors as if they had never been constructed. The crews, the weapons, the energy shields. All of it became nothing more than empty space filled with cosmic dust. Reality anchor networks are activating automatically, reported systems monitor Yan Ho, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. 17 protected worlds are now in isolation bubbles. They're safe for now, but power consumption is higher than projected. The reality anchor technology was working, but barely. Each protected world existed inside a bubble of reinforced reality that the Devourers couldn't penetrate. But these bubbles were like islands in an ocean of nothingness, and the islands were slowly sinking as their power supplies drained away. How long can the networks hold? Dongwu asked. At current consumption rates, maybe 6 months, Yanho replied. But some of the outer networks are already showing stress fractures. If they fail, the protected populations will be exposed. While the galaxy's military leaders struggled with their failing defenses, psychologist Narray was making a crucial observation from her research station. She had been studying the Devourers' behavior patterns, trying to understand how they chose their targets. They're not mindless, she announced to the Emergency Strategy Committee. The Devourers are conducting some kind of quality assessment. They spend time examining each reality bubble before deciding whether to try breaking through it. What kind of assessment? asked General Kim, the current military coordinator. I think they're looking for authenticity, Nare said carefully. Some of our decoy civilizations have been ignored completely, while others have been thoroughly investigated. The ones they investigate are the ones that seem most interesting or unusual. Master Strategist Tai Hyun leaned forward in his chair. Are you saying they're bored by normal civilizations? More than that, I think they're looking for something specific. Something they consider worth preserving or studying. The ancient warnings mentioned that they always leave survivors, but maybe they're not leaving random survivors. Maybe they're choosing which civilizations get to continue existing. This revelation changed everything about the galaxy's defense strategy. Instead of just trying to hide from the Devourers, they needed to make themselves seem valuable enough to preserve. We need to create the ultimate decoy, Tae Hyun realized. Something so interesting, so unique, that the Devourers will spend all their time investigating it while ignoring the real populations. Working with Communications Coordinator Il Sung, they began implementing the most complex deception in galactic history. Using the reality anchor networks, they created false civilizations that seemed more advanced, more complex, and more worthy of study than anything that actually existed. These fake realities were masterpieces of illusion. They showed civilizations that had solved every major problem facing galactic society, achieved perfect peace between species, developed technology that bordered on magic, and created art and philosophy that transcended normal understanding. The key is making them believable, Il Sung explained, as he coordinated the massive deception across hundreds of worlds. The Devourers are ancient and intelligent. They'll see through obvious fakes. But if we make our false civilizations just imperfect enough, with the right kinds of flaws and limitations, they might pass for real. The plan required every species to work together with perfect timing. The Veltar used their crystal technology to create false energy signatures. The Nixari generated fake quantum consciousness fields. The depth simulated entire ocean worlds filled with imaginary populations. Even the smallest colonies contributed by broadcasting false communications and creating artificial signs of life. And slowly, incredibly, the plan began to work. The Devourers, which had been systematically erasing real civilizations, began focusing their attention on the elaborate decoys. They spent days examining each false reality, probing its boundaries, testing its responses to various stimuli. Some decoys were eventually identified as fakes and destroyed, but others held their attention for weeks. Meanwhile, the real populations remained hidden in their reality bubbles, watching through long-range sensors as cosmic entities older than recorded history, debated the worthiness of civilizations that existed only in carefully crafted illusions. But the deception could not last forever. Scout pilot Jun Seo, monitoring the Devourers' activities from a concealed observation post, reported disturbing changes in their behavior. They're learning, he transmitted to the command center. The Devourers are getting better at identifying our fakes. They're developing new testing methods, looking for patterns we didn't expect them to notice. Indeed, as the weeks passed, more and more decoy civilizations were being exposed and eliminated. The Devourers were adapting to the galaxy's deception tactics, becoming more sophisticated in their ability to distinguish between authentic and artificial realities. We're running out of convincing fakes, Il Sung reported grimly, and the reality anchor networks protecting our real populations are showing critical power drain. Some will fail within days. Dongwu stared at the tactical display, watching as red zones marked failed anchor networks spread across the galaxy. They had bought time with their deception, but not enough time. Soon, the real populations would be exposed, and the Devourers would complete their harvest. That was when Mi Kyung, serving as the human representative to the Emergency Council, made a proposal that shocked everyone. What if we stop hiding? She asked. That would be suicide, replied Commander Chen, representing the evacuated military forces. Not necessarily, Mi Kyung continued. The Devourers preserve some civilizations every harvest cycle. They need survivors to regrow the galaxy. What if we volunteer to be those survivors? The council chamber fell silent as representatives from dozens of species considered this radical idea. You're suggesting we surrender? Asked the Veltar representative, its crystal form flickering with confusion. I'm suggesting we negotiate, Mi Kyung replied. The ancient warnings say the Devourers follow rules. They're not chaotic destroyers, they're cosmic gardeners. Gardeners can be reasoned with if you understand what they're trying to accomplish. The plan that emerged from this discussion was perhaps the most desperate gamble in galactic history. Instead of continuing to hide or creating more elaborate deceptions, the remaining populations would reveal themselves to the devourers and attempt to communicate. The message they sent was simple and honest. We understand what you are and why you are here. We do not ask you to spare us all, for we know that is not your nature. But we ask that you choose wisely which among us should carry the future forward. We offer ourselves for your judgment. The response came not in words, but in a sudden stillness that spread across the galaxy. The devourers stopped their systematic destruction and began considering, for 3 days. The entire galaxy held its breath as ancient entities that existed partially outside reality itself examined the offer. They probed the minds of representatives from each species, studying their thoughts, their hopes, and their potential for future growth. What they found there surprised them. The humans, the youngest and most primitive species in the galactic community, showed something the devourers had never encountered before: the ability to sense their presence across dimensional boundaries. The humans could feel wrongness in the fabric of reality itself, a capability that even the devourers found intriguing. More importantly, humans showed an unusual pattern of thinking that combined logical analysis with intuitive leaps, rational planning with emotional responses, individual creativity with collective cooperation. They were chaotic enough to be unpredictable, yet organized enough to create complex civilizations. The devourers realized that humanity represented something genuinely new in their 50,000-year cycle of galactic cultivation, a species that might develop in directions they had never seen before. And so, for the first time in cosmic history, the devourers made an unprecedented decision. Instead of harvesting the vast majority of galactic civilization and leaving only scattered survivors, they would harvest only the failing and stagnant civilizations. Species that showed genuine potential for growth and change would be allowed to continue developing. The price for this mercy was high. Nearly a third of galactic civilization was still erased, including some of the oldest and most advanced species. The Veltar, despite their mathematical perfection, were judged too rigid to grow further. The Nexari collective consciousness was deemed too stable to produce new innovations. But humanity, along with several other younger species, passed the devourers' evaluation. They were judged to have sufficient chaos, sufficient potential for unexpected development to warrant continued existence.